So once again, we come back to have another discussion that we're calling attempted intelligence, and this time, what I hope that we can center our discussion around is the concept that we've touched on in some ways before of essentially holding out something that would be best termed constructivist as positivist.
Okay. Yeah.
So prior to delving further into the topic or further describing it, just the general reminder that constructivism is...
the truth is dependent on the observer.
Right, so I will extend it as, maybe I haven't done it in this fashion before. Constructivism would hold that the truth is entirely dependent on the observer, the environment, and their previous experience.
Okay.
Whereas positivism would be...
independent of the observer.
So there is one truth, independent of the observer. Positivism would essentially modify that a little bit, where they would claim that there is one truth. However, as humans, we are flawed, and all methods for searching for the truth are flawed. Therefore, we will have a hard time finding it, and we are going to be required to use many methods, which is why the post-positivist would accept constructivist methods and positivist methods. Okay. Now, something to extend that very broadly, right, and to introduce another concept, is constructivism posits that there are multiple realities that are or multiple truths entirely dependent on observer, environment, and previous experience. So what they will do in good constructivist methodology in science is they will assay many people who have their independent truths or individual truths, and from that will emerge a common theme.
Okay.
The emergence of that common theme that is stable across all of these individuals, however, it will look different, right? It will look different, but it is stable. You can find this concept and this emergent theme in everybody. Is that constructivist or positivist?
Finding the common theme. So
that if there is a common theme that emerges from multiple truths, is that multiple truths or is that one truth?
It's slightly confusing, but I feel like you're going into the realm of positivism where you're doing one.
So it's an interesting thing, right? Where you assay many truths, and you find the stable feature that is observable between them.
Right.
Now, positivism, this is the annoying part, you're looking for one truth.
Right.
And when you observe, let's say you observe humans, do you find one stable truth or do you find an array of variation?
You find an array.
So positivism tends to find, when looking at humans, tends to find constructivism, and constructivism, when observing humans, tends to find positivism. So it can be claimed that these things are in tension, but realistically there's an argument to be built that they are complementary and mutually affirmative, right? So it's like, you're both right, shut up! Now that said, constructivism, when mutated and not attempting to find the emergent phenomena between people, we've had a discussion about that. What have we talked about that would be mutated constructivism, or at least in my claim?
Was that, I'm trying to remember, is it postmodernism?
Postmodernism, right? Now again, postmodernism, generally properly defined, refers to art, architecture, and things of that nature, not necessarily thought. However, there's an argument to be made that essentially there's only my truth, and everything is created by people or created by humans, and it's nothing is... It's not that nothing is real, it's that what's real is what I think. Right? So, and that's fine, right? There are some things that come out of that are positive as far as being or having utility to push a conversation. It's a different perspective. It says, hey, maybe I need to rethink this to see if I'm actually on the right track and not necessarily stay there. So the criticism can have high utility for all.
Right.
But if you stay on that path and it's only my truth is the only thing that exists, it's tough, right? It doesn't seem to push a group forward.
Right.
It can push the individual forward, and if the individual claims that they're speaking for the group, it's like, yeah, well, no, you're not.
Yeah.
Like you say you are, but
it's problematic. Yeah.
It's tough. Now, we take this, we kind of jumble all this initial preamble, and we talk about a news story, not one news story, any news story.
Okay.
Right. The any news story or the hypothetical news story, is it often going to be including sampling from an entire population.
So just trying to understand for the news story, say the story is going across multiple news networks, and I can catch this story on multiple different channels. And
Let's just say somebody lands on Mars.
Okay.
Okay. Would that probably be carried on all news networks that you would be aware of on planet Earth today?
Most likely.
If somebody landed on Mars.
Yes.
Okay. We had proof of it. Okay. So in that sense, if you're talking about a story that goes across all those networks, sure.
Okay.
Fine. But that may not necessarily be the best one for the conversation that we're having. So say a story whereby there is a dispute about some behavior that occurred in public.
Okay.
It doesn't matter which one,
Yeah.
right? But there's a dispute about a behavior that happened in public. So say somebody did something that in a video clip had some level of physical contact between people.
Okay.
Right? The reason I want to be vague is because I don't want to necessarily start to try to pin this on a story that we've heard.
Exactly.
Right? Because this is in the abstract. Now, in the exercise of having this discussion, are we being positivists or are we being constructivists?
In the exercise of this
Discussion, right? And in staying vague and saying like from my experience and whatever.
Yeah, I feel that it's very much constructivist in the sense that it's based on,
Yeah, and also there's an emergent truth from the discussion that we're having that is entirely dependent on us, our current environment, and our previous experiences.
Yes.
So it's emergent. So it's anyways. So there's a news story that breaks across all these channels whereby there's physical contact during this bit. Whatever happens, there's physical contact between people. Okay. Now, when I place this on different news networks, is the reporting going to be the same?
I feel it's going to be different because you have different
But
reporters.
so what's going to be the same?
The clip or the information.
Yeah, the information, and then maybe what is said about it is going to be different, right? So you get this emergent phenomena from one truth that you get many things. So that may support my general position that from a single thing you can identify variation.
Okay.
Right? So looking for one truth, you can find many truths or many things that are dependent on the observer. News reporting could be one of these things.
Well, and even, I was just thinking, even if they reported the same, wouldn't every observer observe it differently?
If it's based on how humans seem to work, how our brains seem to work, how our nervous system seems to work, it's not necessarily as possible, it's a guarantee.
Okay.
Right. My understanding is that based on a quirk of language, and I don't know where it is in the world, but there is a culture based on a quirk of language that doesn't have multiple descriptors of shades of blue. There are certain shades of blue that they literally can't see because they can't describe it in their language. Now you give them another descriptor in another language and it becomes something they understand, it may actually open up their visual spectrum. I don't necessarily know if when it opens up their visual spectrum to identify it, that they experience it or that they just say, yeah, that's what that thing's called. Right. So I don't know that.
I get that, okay.
Now, so we have a single incident, same video clip across news networks. The things that are said on each news network happen to be different. Right. Or so the event's the same, the description's different. Okay, so from a singular observation, many things are said. Now, why would these news networks say something different about the same thing? What's the point?
Well, wouldn't a news network want to have more viewers? So they're saying the story in a very specific way to draw more attention?
Now, would you say that the general desire, or the general concept in the zeitgeist or in the population broadly, at least as far as your understanding and your experience is concerned, would you say that it's the news should report the facts or that the news should try to draw viewers?
Well, I feel the news should report the facts.
Okay, now I would say I want my science and my news to be deontological, right? So I want their ethical justification to be based on duty. It is my duty to report the facts. It's not what happens, right? And that's what this conversation is essentially centering around. So you're saying, if I report it my way, I'm going to attract people who are going to be attracted to my way. So would you call that duty-based, or would you call that outcome-based?
I would call that outcome-based.
So it's teleological at that point, right? So the justification, the ethical justification, is it's outcome-based.
Right.
Now, what is the outcome? Right. So you talked about more viewers, but who cares if I have more viewers? What's my outcome? Where does it go?
So you're asking me as the news.
The news network, the newscaster, whatever it happens to be.
It still gets spread out. I'm still not getting as many viewers.
Sure, but so if somebody likes your message,
okay,
do they watch for a moment and leave, or do they continue to watch?
If they like it, they usually watch it, and then, I don't know, it's almost like they want to gravitate to more things that are similar, but they'll watch it longer.
Okay, so they can watch it longer.
Yeah.
Right, so, because if you disagree with something, do you sit there and bask in the disagreement, or do you say, I can change the channel? No, some people
I was
won't
going to say, it
change the
depends
channel.
on who you
Depends on some people won't change the channel, but it's easy to, it's a thing that people will say, change the channel.
Right.
But if you're resonating with something, it's at least hypothetical that you'll watch it longer.
Yeah, longer. It just reinforces the feelings I already have.
Now, why as a network would I care if you watch it longer?
Well, you're getting ratings based on views and money and incentive based on views.
Okay.
So the longer you watch, the more you're going to talk about that news and where you got it from.
When you say you're going to talk about that news and where you got it from, you're talking about as the individual who watched it, who walked away into your general life and talked about what you saw on the news network.
Yes.
Okay, so you're saying you watch it for a longer period of time and then you go tell people about the channel that you watched. Is that what?
Pretty much.
Okay,
That's what
so
I'm saying.
water cooler chat.
Yes.
Right. But I saw on News Network A, but News Network B.
Yes.
Right, so that's not necessarily what I'm trying to point to. You've already essentially built the argument that I would make, because what you said was the longer you watch, the more ratings you get, but also the more money you get based on advertising.
Right.
So the news model is attract viewers to sell advertising.
Oh.
So the longer you can prove to a prospective advertiser that you can keep eyes engaged on your show,
Right.
the more valuable you become, because there's a perceived higher return on investment.
Mm-hmm.
So the longer somebody watches your channel, the more likely they are to see my advertisement.
Right. Because there's going to be breaks.
So that means that there's the possibility that if I can keep you engaged longer, you will make me more money.
Right.
So in that general milieu, in that general frame, is the news the product, or are your eyes the product?
So what are they selling?
Yeah. So is the network selling the news to you, or is the network selling you to the advertiser?
The second one, because
who gets the money?
Exactly.
Now, this isn't necessarily me trying to tell anybody that something is correct or incorrect. It's attempting to have a conversation that we didn't have prior.
Right.
That, obviously I'm guiding, right?
Yeah.
So I'm pointing towards something, and the manner in which I frame the questions will make certain answers more likely to emerge, right? So, it's almost like I'm leading you on some level. Now, whether that's absolutely the case, or whether you and I just overlap in our thinking often enough that we come to similar conclusions when presented with similar information, that's entirely possible too, right? So, yeah, that's right, many truths. So, if you can suggest that my attention is a product. So, did you watch the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma?
No, I did not.
Okay. I have a hard time sitting through it, right?
Yeah.
I watched a little bit, and I understand the argument superficially enough and the manner in which it was presented didn't grab me enough, so, it's kind of hard to sell the advertising on that through my eyes, right? But I may be part of the general overall average that helps. That's cool. The general argument with social media is that what their market is the attention market. The longer they can keep your eyes on it, the more valuable that platform is to an advertiser. So the more they can charge for it.
Right.
I would say that that's actually not a different model necessarily. There is an argument to be made that the classical news model and the social media monetization model are slightly different, but I would say that the product is the same.
Right.
The product is the attention.
Right.
So there is an argument that the classic news model, for the longest time, was more about the news, right? And I would suggest broadly, if there's advertising involved, that realistically the product is the attention of the observer.
Right.
Right. Now, it doesn't mean that I'm perfectly correct. It just means that I would put that case forward.
Right.
Right. So what's happened is that the news has morphed in certain ways to something else superficially, but the underlying thing still remains.
Yeah.
I'm the product. My attention is the product. Your attention is the product.
Right.
So if your attention is the product, and I can prove over time with greater and greater computing power that if I engage you in a certain way, you're more likely to stay.
Mm-hmm.
Am I not going to refine to continue to do that?
Yes.
Because I'm selling your attention
Right.
to somebody else.
Yeah.
Right? So at that level, at this point, we have greater and greater refinement and understanding of how to sell somebody's attention to an advertiser.
Yep.
So should we be deeply surprised or deeply upset that this is what we're continuing to buy into? Right? So this is where we can talk about locus of control, external locus of control, and internal locus of control. There are some things that you can't control.
Yep.
They do happen outside of you. You can control to some degree, right? Depending on who you are, you'll think it's a greater degree or a lesser degree, how you engage with it. Right? So should we be surprised that when people recognize that they can keep our attention longer and they're trying to sell our attention, that they're going to try to do the same thing over and over again?
Well, no.
Right? Should we be upset at them?
Well, no.
Can you be upset at them?
Yes.
Of course you can. Right? It just depends on your perspective.
Yeah.
You can totally be upset at them.
Yeah.
However, it doesn't necessarily profit you. It may not be highly useful for you.
Right.
What may be more useful for you is say, wait a minute, I literally know that all of you are trying to take my money.
Right.
Or trying to sell me.
Right.
You're all trying to sell me on some level. Maybe I could choose who I'm comfortable selling me. Right? Like, who am I, what service do I gain utility from that if they sell my attention, I'm not going to be that mad.
Right.
You've seen, so on my TV, because I happen to stream through an external device, I don't happen to sign into a specific account for the way that I watch YouTube, but I've scrolled through and you've seen what pops up on my general feed based on previously watched things. Does it seem like it makes sense?
No, it's all over the place.
Right?
It's all over the place.
The algorithm doesn't necessarily know what to do with me and my watching habits because I don't necessarily watch one and only one thing.
Right.
I watch multiple things. The thing that I've also noticed is when an algorithm starts to push me. I appreciate the way that you're laughing, but it's like, oh, you might also like this. I'm like, I wouldn't like that. You shut up. Go away, you goddamn computer. Don't tell me what I like. I'm going to find what I like. Hey, you're boring me with your predictions. Let me go find something else. That's me as an individual. So when I happen to note that something is attempting to control my choice, I fight.
Okay.
It may not look like violence,
right?
But it's just like, no, dude, you're not. No. You don't tell me how to feel.
I mean, you got to sift longer, but you're like, I'm going to put in the work. I'm going to find it.
And guess what? If I can't get to a point where I'm happy with the medium between me and the possible suggestions and my search pattern, I'm going to turn it off.
I don't know, because you find a new medium and just turn it off.
And I go to bed.
Yeah.
I sleep about it. You're frustrating me. I go to sleep.
Yeah.
I don't know what to do. I'm going to bed. But Sam, it's 5. I'll figure it out. You can always go back to sleep.
Yes.
So the algorithm has to build off of what you've already done.
Right.
And the underlying assumption of what you've already done is that you want to continue to do the same thing. As an individual, I may be an example of somebody who doesn't necessarily want to continue to do the same superficial thing.
Right.
The underlying thing that I want to do is be exposed to new information on some level, right, with some variety.
Right.
But there are certain things that I won't resonate with, and it's harder for me to stick with them. It's annoying. But the things that I want to stick with, I have to examine more.
Right.
Right. Like I keep saying, it pulls on my dumb strings because I like it already. So the algorithm exists. I know it exists. I know what it's trying to do. Be it news, be it some form of predictive media that's through an online platform.
Yeah.
It's trying to sell my attention to somebody else. And on some level, I can't escape that, but I can do something within that framework.
Right.
Right. So the thing that I want to come back to, though, is that because it's trying to sell your attention to somebody else, one of the best ways to sell your attention is to give you what you want to pay attention to. Now, do people want to pay attention to well-reasoned, well-balanced stories that include both sides, the conflict between them, and the fact that there's no clear resolution? Or do they want to say, this is what it is?
Well, I feel like it's the second one.
Sure.
Yeah.
So now that we've talked about previously that there will be one video clip reported in different ways, so we can call that constructivism. So from one central observation,
right.
there are multiple realities that are dependent on the observer, the environment, and previous experience. So they're trying to sell you their brand, their take,
right.
to keep your eyes on it longer because you like it.
Right.
Right? So would you say that any of them present that as their brand of the truth or the truth?
It's the truth to them.
Maybe not to them,
yeah.
but maybe for the purposes of capturing your attention.
Right, capturing your attention.
So they're saying it's the one truth, and anybody who says any different is full of crap.
Yes.
Right? So they're acting like bad constructivists. So they are saying something different about a central feature, right? So from one thing, multiple truths emerge dependent on observer, environment, and previous experience. The environment could be said to be the incentive structure,
right.
capturing attention, so I can sell your eyes to advertisers. But they present it as if it's the one truth, and anybody who says different is full of crap.
The one truth that comes only from us.
Yeah, so you better keep watching.
Exactly.
Right? So it becomes an example of where constructivism is passed as positivism. So I can make the case that bad constructivism tries to act as positivism.
Okay.
And bad positivism tries to say that it's right. So they essentially suffer the same problem.
Right.
It's like bad positivism would say that there isn't variation, it's this thing. They try to point to the average as opposed to the fact that the average came from multiple data points and
right.
variation is normal, right? So as I said before, constructivism is many truths that present an emergent theme when done well. Positivism, when examining humans
right.
at least, will look for one truth, but it will present variation, right? So it's like the data plot. You get the average, but the average is made up of all the data points, right? Where what happens with constructivism, so it's almost like positivism takes all the data points and goes to the middle. Constructivism, like they kind of all go to the middle anyways.
Yeah,
but realistically, what positivism is observing is the variation. Right. What constructivism is observing is the similarity between the variation.
I would say it is, it's like it is the variation, but they're trying to find the average.
Maybe the way I'm trying to say it is not, I thought it was awesome, but it didn't come out right. But the central concept being that bad constructivism passes itself off as positivism.
Right.
And bad positivism won't acknowledge the variation, right? So they both end up digging down.
Right.
So that's where you can see the conflict, and this is evident in the news because the news is trying. You are the product. Your eyes and your attention are the product, or your ability to sense what they're putting out. Because it doesn't have to be your eyes, because you can hear it, right? And then if you can't hear it, there may be other ways for you to consume it, right? So it doesn't have to be the eyes. I should be careful with that because the truth is there are multiple ways to consume information.
That's right.
Multiple senses, right? So, but again, you're the product, right? Now, it's funny because I'm attempting to say this and have this conversation with you while creating a video that will go on YouTube that I'm hoping people will watch on some level and capture attention, and eventually,
I'm glad that you pointed that out.
and eventually, if enough people watch, then there's a monetization opportunity.
Right.
But I'm hoping to do it to the best of our ability in a fashion where we're trying to point to the balanced story. And guess what that's not going to do? That's not going to make diehard fans or people that want to watch because we're saying what they like.
Right.
We're challenging. Right? We're challenging underlying assumptions on some level. And if you challenge underlying assumptions, people won't always stay.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? Because I don't want to compromise on that. And I don't know if you want to compromise on that. And maybe if you change your mind, that's cool.
Yeah.
Right? We'll high five about it. We'll still be nice to each other. Anything you'd like to add? Do you think that is a fairly complete thought?
Yeah, I'd like to maybe revisit the the definition of that constructivism and positivism when you're going to the bad spectrum at a later point.
Okay.
Just so we can kind of, clean that up. But
Okay.
I do understand where you're taking this array and finding that similar arc, and then taking the array and like erasing it and just having that one focal point.
Yeah.
But other than that, I
And
think
when you say you're talking about me observing that's what happens with a well done investigation in those two overarching epistemologies.
correct.
Okay. Correct. Because I'm not actually doing it, I'm
Yes.
observing it.
Yes.
Okay. Goddamn accuracy.
No, that's it.
All right. Well, I guess I said we'd high five about it, so enjoy.